Hello and welcome to another Tuesday talk with Ruby Reese. Shortly, I will be joined by Louise from Light After Loss to speak about quite an emotionally challenged topic this evening, healing from pet loss. So I think Louise is already in chat. And while she's joining, I'll just mention that all of the recordings of past talks are going up on our website. So usually in the day or two after the live, so that you can kind of go forward and back between the chat, re-listen to certain sections and things like that. Louise, brilliant to see you. Thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Hi, Killian. How are things?
Good. Would you do us the pleasure of introducing yourself?
No bother whatsoever. My name is Louise Griffey, and I am a certified grief recovery specialist. I have decided to specialise in helping people through pet loss. So that is the brief description.
Very good, and we'll dig further into what you do later on. So as a quick introduction to myself as well, for anyone that doesn't know me, I'm Killian from Ruby Reese, and we launched the brand about a year ago, coming up to 13 months, all to do with providing top quality pet products for keeping your dog nice and healthy and happy. But today, unfortunately, we're going to talk, or fortunately as well, we're going to talk about a more unfortunate situation that's kind of inevitable, healing from pet loss. So the first question, I guess, that we have to get out there is, what is grief and why do we avoid talking about grief and the topic of death?
So grief generally are the roller coaster of emotions of what we experience following a major loss experience in our lives. So why we avoid it is often avoided by members of society because literally we don't want to feel pain. It's really painful. So we're running away from it. We avoid it. And I've done this myself, particularly when it comes to the death of both of my dogs back in 2019. I definitely suppressed it and I definitely ran away from it. So it's so common, Killian, like the suppression of those emotions of grief. It's widespread, and I'm trying to bring awareness to the fact that grief around pet loss is completely normal and natural. These are natural reactions to have.
Exactly, and I suppose in one sense what you're saying, it sounds very natural to kind of suppress and protect yourself, I suppose, is probably what your brain's trying to do. But I also have something kind of niggling in my mind that we're speaking to a very Irish audience, and I have this feeling, or a stereotype maybe, that Irish people just in general are not very, very good with dealing with their emotions, and that's a generalization.
Yeah, completely. And we're great at funerals and we're great at giving send-offs, and we're great at supporting people directly after the death. But when it comes to the weeks and months after the loss, people tend to not know how to deal with it, what to say, what will I do to help, and they just kind of keep a distance. That's what I've found. Obviously, that's not for everybody. Like, obviously I can't speak for every situation, but that is the general consensus when it comes to us here in Ireland and dealing with grief. Yeah, completely right.
Yeah, and like from an emotional and maybe psychological standpoint, can losing a pet be compared to losing a family member, do you think?
I would say when we're talking about comparison should never come into it, ever, because the emotional intensity of the relationship that we've had with our pet, we can't compare that to any other relationship, nor can we compare the feelings of grief from one loss of a human loss to another human. We can't, they're incomparable. So it can be quite hurtful and quite unhelpful to talk about comparing losses, but obviously this is what's out in society, and many of us, even people that have to go straight back into work after the death of a pet, is horrendous. And a lot of employers and colleagues, they just don't understand, and they may say things like, sure, it was only a pet, can't you get another one, or this and that and the other. That's so common with my clients when they say that they're just not understood. Whereas if it was a family member, take all the time you need, and so on and so forth. You see, there's just such a stigma. It's such a discounted form of grief. I think it's one of the most discounted forms of grief in society at the minute.
I can imagine, because I could see some people finding it very valid to kind of brush it off. I don't want to say laugh it off, because I don't think anyone has intentions that are explicitly negative for people that they genuinely like. But I think people might brush it off and just say, yeah, but you know what, it was only a pet. So you see a lot of people that find it even more difficult because they just don't get empathy from others, is it?
Exactly. So they're kind of buried underground, basically, because for fear of judgment and for fear of kind of feeling weak and so on. So this is what's really common that I hear from a lot of people, and they have been searching for a place to be open and feel understood and not feel judged. So that is what I've kind of formed it within the groups and within the one-on-ones that I do, to form like that safe place that people can open up and not feel that they have to bury their feelings and suppress that grief.
And like, I suppose you said that every relationship is different, but I suppose every situation is as well. So you can have, like we all know from every relationship, you can have a sudden death, or you can have one that's kind of been, known somewhat prior to, or one that's been really drawn out, unfortunately. So do you think it helps people in their grieving process if they've had time to prepare? And is there anything you can do to prepare for a potential oncoming death, let's say?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good question, because when grieving pet parents, the grieving process has already begun. If you are aware that, say, your pet has a terminal diagnosis or is very elderly and maybe nearing the end of its days, somewhat, yes, it can be helpful because the grieving process has begun. So they have started to come to terms with what life may look like after the passing of their pet. And that can also start that healing process for them. But when we're talking about sudden death, and I can speak for my own situation, both of my dogs died within a very short space of time of each other, tragically. So I had no time to prepare. I never even thought what my life would be like without them. I put that to the back of my mind, as many pet parents do, and I couldn't envisage my life without them. So a huge sense of purpose was gone, and there was trauma there. There were so many symptoms that I had to go through, panic attacks, and just the list kind of went on, and I didn't have that time to prepare. But that being said, the level of grief that I felt, that level of grief can equally be felt by somebody who did have time to prepare, because there's still unmet hopes, dreams and expectations that they still wanted to have with their pet. Be that if they were terminally ill, maybe they were a young dog. So there was really, it's a difficult one, to kind of hash out. We could talk about that particular topic even for 20 minutes, half an hour, but that is the best way that I can kind of, get into that and describe it as best as possible. Yeah.
So it's a process, and they've just, simplifying and generalizing, they may have started that process earlier. And it's interesting you mentioned process, because I suppose you hear things and see things online like 5 stages of grieving, 7 stages of grieving. Are there set stages of grieving, or are these frameworks entirely made up, or is there any relevance to them?
So I would not say that they're made up, but the 5 stages of grief, as the term is coined, is not is not, it was kind of misconstrued over the years. So as the generations went on, so the 5 stages of grief, which originated from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work, she did research and work on the 5 emotions or the 5 feelings that somebody felt when they were dying of a terminal illness. So it was a person that was alive that was dying of a terminal illness. Those were the 5 stages that they went through. So for some reason, this got twisted and changed down through the years, and people now believe that this is what we go through after somebody close to us or an animal passes away. But completely, that's not truth, and it's all over. It's all over the internet. People can pop it into Google, and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work will show up straight away. And she was quite upset herself that towards the end of her days that her work got kind of, it was misinformed and kind of just, it was frustrating for her. So, but people do believe that there are 5 stages of grief. And often I kind of wondered, even myself, before I trained and became certified, when I lost my dogs, I thought, well, what flipping stage am I in now, I didn't feel the denial stage. I was never in denial. I knew, my brain registered that they had died, but I'm like, well, when am I going to do this stage? And I was all over the place. But when I learned this information, and when I teach people about grief education, it really opens their eyes, and they realize, oh, it's kind of a relief, because actually it's an emotional roller coaster. So there aren't any set stages. There isn't any set timeline for how long you're supposed to grieve. There just isn't. So I'm glad you asked that question.
Okay, brilliant. And you just at the end there touched on kind of timelines and things like that. But one of the most common phrases that's out there on this topic is "time will heal." So, is there some validity to this? How do you feel about that phrase and way of thinking?
Yeah, it's like a little pet peeve of mine.
Okay.
And it's almost like, the term "time will heal." When we think about that logically and we say it out loud, time alone itself can't heal. So if we put this in a simple terms, we're not speaking about death for a minute. If we get a flat tire, if we go to work in the morning and we have a flat tire, do we pull up a chair and sit there and time will heal and the tire will just reinflate and we can go to work? No. I know that's a very simple example, but when we think about that logically, we have to put action into place in order for the tire to be fixed and for us to go to work. So it's the exact same thing when it comes to grief. If we believe that time will heal, we are just suppressing that. We're like, well, I'm just going to leave it there now, and I'm not going to look at it, I'm not going to process it, I'm not going to speak about it, and over the years it will get better. Yes, the intensity of the pain reduces. Yes, I will say that, but the wound is not healed. So that's what I will say about time will heal. So
sure. And I suppose we've all seen that, regardless of what sort of grief friends are going through, or ourselves or family members, that eventually it's going to come out, and eventually you're going to go on a journey. So the feeling I'm getting from you is that people are on a journey, and it's their own journey, and it's quite individual to them.
Yes, because as soon as we're born, we experience loss, and there are 40 different kinds of loss. This is not just about death. So even when we're small, even, for example, if kids are bullied in school, there is a loss of trust, there's a loss of safety, a loss of self. And just if you can visualize a backpack, and every time a loss experience happens to us, a stone or a rock goes into the backpack, and this fills up and gets heavier and heavier the older we get. And then something huge happens, a huge major loss event happens to us. For example, the passing of our pet or a loved one. And we can't carry this anymore. There are too many rocks in that backpack. And that's when it happens. That's when we realize, okay, we've tipped it's over now, and we need to look at this, and we need to process some of these last experiences. And that can take a lot of time, and that can be overwhelming for a lot of people. Where do I start, and so on. And when we're talking about loss, I didn't realize that, for example, breakups were that I didn't grieve, that you have to grieve after you break up with somebody. Or when there was career loss or health loss of a major impact, if you had to change career over health or anything like that, that I suppressed a lot of those feelings down when I went through those kind of situations. And those are all examples of grief, of a major loss experience. And it's a classic example of suppression and not feeling our feelings and not talking about it. So there is a lot of work to unpack for a lot of clients when they go on their grief recovery journey. Definitely, yeah.
And I suppose there's a two-edged question now, that like what can people do to help themselves first and foremost? What steps do you think people would be best taking? Say that they've just recently lost a pet. What are the next practical steps to do with coping and then dealing with the grief step by step? And at what point is it a good idea to speak with a professional?
Mm-hmm. So when the loss happens initially at the very early stages, my first and major kind of advice would be, if at all possible, if it is possible, to take time off work or college or school, whatever that avenue that you're in at the minute. And I know that can be difficult for people or not possible, but if there's a possibility to take annual leave, please do. Like take time to grieve, like take some time off what you're normally doing, because keeping busy and distracting is not going to help with beginning to process what just happened in grieving. So that's the initial kind of advice that I would give. And if there is somebody that you feel safe around and comfortable around speaking with about this, like when we're talking about pet loss, some people just don't feel comfortable talking to family. They don't feel that they understand. That's completely understandable. If there's a best friend who really understood the connection that you had with your pet, that person, and you feel safe enough to say, I'm really struggling with this, like I am just absolutely heartbroken, to try and open up to them would be my second port of call. And be gentle on yourselves and having awareness. That would be my third thing. Have awareness that the grief that you are feeling due to the death of your adoring pet that you loved and was your family, was your best friend, that is real grief. It's valid. Some people don't believe that I don't have to grieve. It's not real. They're not a human, just because animals aren't verbal. They can communicate with us in so many ways, so many ways. And you know this as a pet parent. You'll know all the ways that your gorgeous Ruby will communicate with you. And not to dismiss that either, not to dismiss that the relationship is completely valid. And yeah, that would be my third part. And then the second part of your question, when should they seek support if they feel that they need that? If some people don't have that support in, say, a friend or a family member or some kind of dynamic that they can feel, that they can process and talk about their feelings, if people don't feel that they have that, or if they're really struggling day to day with those intense emotions, and if it is impacting your life in a negative way, such as work, normal things. I mean, people can get ill from not processing grief, physically ill. Lack of concentration is a huge, huge response to grief, like getting things wrong at work, forgetting what you went out to the kitchen for, all of these things, like just by 10 times, like it'll be crazy. So if you're feeling that this is happening to you and you're struggling with it, that is when I would say to reach out for support, be that a therapist, a counsellor, or someone like myself that specialises in pet loss, grief, recovery kind of support, that would be really helpful. For me, like joining a Facebook group, pet loss groups and things like this that can help you to connect with others that don't understand how you feel, because we all can't know exactly how each other feels, but who can relate to what we're going through. So I often say that to my clients. They say, I want to join a group where I know, like, I want to be with other people who know exactly how I feel. And it's like, well, it's not the group for you, because those people will never know exactly how you feel. And that's a really valid point. But those people can empathize because they can relate. They haven't had the exact same experience, but they can relate because they have been through something similar. So that's a really important point that I definitely wanted to get across as well.
Definitely. I think support groups sound brilliant. And, speaking to a professional, I personally think I probably need this, because going back to your very first point about people can help themselves, I'd have no problem with taking a couple of days to allocate to something like this, should, if and when anything happens to Ruby. But the thing is, I'm someone that naturally likes to be busy, like to keep myself busy, don't necessarily know what to do with my time off. So how does someone, particularly someone that is usually very good at keeping themselves busy, how would I then sit down and start processing my thoughts and making myself kind of begin this grieving process?
So to use myself as an example again, I was kind of very similar, the way you describe yourself. I was similar like that. Once, the week or two after they passed away, I couldn't be alone in my house because it was very painful and I lived on my own. So I would just finish work and head out and walk 10 or 15 kilometers a night, and wouldn't spend time, wouldn't just stop moving. So I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts, like you say. But I did that for a number of months, and there's only so long that you can sustain that, because that intense feeling, the physical pain in the chest and panic attacks and some other symptoms that I was experiencing, they were not easing, they were not getting better. And I said, okay, I had to sit down and say to myself, I'm not feeling better. My life has become really, really difficult. What am I going to do? I'm gonna have to do something. I need help. So I think it was, you kind of get to a point where you feel that you need help, and you feel that you don't know what that is, but you go searching. So that would be the point where I would definitely consider, a lot of my clients would have come to that point where either somebody has told them about me, or they have found me online or on social media, or they have searched for some way for, how can I feel better? How can I recover? How can I feel better from this grief? Is this normal? So first they wanted validation. Well, first they were aware that they needed help. Then they wanted a way to see if these feelings were valid, which of course they were. And then the help comes. So that would be my, just not to keeping busy and distracting. In Ireland, we've been told that by our parents, our grandparents, keep busy, you'll be grand, you're strong, you're from this line of family and you're great, and they all just got on with it. And this is what we've had to kind of listen to growing up. And some of my family have even said it to me, and it comes from a really good place. There's no malice behind it or anything. It's just, it's not helpful. It's not helpful for grief. Connecting with people that are going through something similar, or meeting with friends who have been through pet loss, and keeping busy that way, as in doing things that way to connect, but it aids your healing. That's what helps. I'm not saying that you have to sit alone in your house and cry and write and do journaling and meditating and do your online, groups and everything. You can go and do things, but as long as it's aiding in your healing, and it's that you're not suppressing those painful feelings. I know I rambled on there now, sorry.
No, not at all. It's super interesting, honestly. So do you also offer group sessions online, or is everything you do one-to-one, or how is that set up?
Yeah, so I offer both. I work completely online so that I can work with people all around the world in different time zones. And the program that I offer, it's educational based, but it has huge therapeutic benefits. So it's very different to therapy because there's a set goal at the end, and there's assignments, and there's reading, and there's interaction with others, and it's a fantastic way to learn about grief, learn about your own grief, learn how to heal from one particular loss that you want to work on, and connect with others, be that in a group or in a one-on-one setting. It's the exact same program. It's just some people feel more comfortable in a one-on-one setting, and they kind of don't feel ready for like a group. And my groups are quite small, like 4 to 5 people. I kind of try to keep them small and kind of do them regularly. The summer is kind of a quiet time because many people are gone on holidays. So I finishing up with a couple of groups in the next couple of weeks, and then I'm kind of taking a break until September and getting back into the swing of it. But I do take on a couple of one-on-one clients every month. So there's always that availability for people if they're needing that support. So that would be the brief description of it without getting into too much detail. Yeah.
No, that's brilliant. It's brilliant to know that you're definitely. I think you're really brave. Dealing with a subject like this, because it's hard enough to deal with your own grief, but also helping other people through it. It's really aspirational. So that's amazing. And I suppose one other thing, as sharing is brilliant and everything, people are trying to help themselves. But say if you are a friend of someone that you know that's going through grief, particularly for pet loss, but I suppose any grief. You mentioned at the beginning, and I think it's brilliant because I never know what to do, and we're all the same, and I think it's always so difficult to know what to do. Like you say, you can offer immediate help, and that's and nice words and be caring and offer people a shoulder to cry on or an ear to listen, but are there other ways that we can help?
Yes,
or is
yes.
Do you have any advice for people that are saying?
Yeah, that's a great question, because many people ask me that, and it's so natural. Like, it's so natural. Like, we stutter and we freeze and we don't know, God, I'm going to say the wrong thing, and so on and so forth. It's so natural. Be that the loss of a human or loss of a pet, it's people just don't have a clue. It's particularly with pet loss. They're like, I don't know, should I mention anything at all? I mean, somebody said to me a week after, why don't you go and get a new puppy? And I'm like, that's not helpful, like, as in,
yeah.
I mean, I did a live today about replacing the loss, that is a myth around grief. So, I mean, that's a total other topic. But when we're talking about trying to help people, I just want to say that it's okay not to know what to say. That's okay. A lot of people. And you can literally verbally say that to the person. You can say, look, I'm not sure what to say to help or to support you. I don't know what's the right thing to say, but I want you to know that I'm here for you whenever you want to talk about your pet's name, and talk about, if you want to talk about what happened, that I want to provide that listening ear. And if there are other ways, there's something like when people are deep in grief, and if they are, like, I took a couple of weeks off work, I couldn't function. So there are things you can do, like you can say, look, I know that you're struggling right now and you're grieving. Is there something I can do? Will I go and do the food shop? Will I bring you a cooked meal? Would you like to go for a little walk for 20 minutes? I can meet you and we can go out and get some fresh air. Is there something that I can do? And some people also might want to do, like, maybe they want to bring a memorial gift, whether that's a portrait or whether that's, some pictures that they got downloaded and made into a little collage or something. There's so many ideas. People love those. That's how you can show that you care, even if you don't know what to say. There are so many ways to show that person that you're there. And another major one, I know I've gone on with the list of things, but another major one is don't forget to check in on that person even months after the loss.
Mm-hmm.
It's all well and good checking in once a week or twice a week for the first month, but check in on the anniversaries, or check in at random times. Say, look, how are you feeling now? And would you like to go for a walk? Or don't be afraid to mention their pet's name. How are you feeling about? Because it's more often than not, a lot of friends and family of the grieving pet parent, their pet's name may not have ever been mentioned again since the day that the pet died. And that's so hurtful for so many people, so many. Almost like, well, nobody cares and everyone's just forgotten about my pet. And that's probably not true. It's just people don't know what to say. So those are some, and there's so many ideas. There's lots of ideas over on my page as well that people can look through my profile. I've done a few posts on tips of what to say and everything. So there's loads more, but I'll take up the whole night talking about it.
No, it's all very, very interesting what you're saying, honestly. And I suppose even what's resonated with me while you were speaking is that I think lots of us have also been on the receiving end, say, grieving a human at, Irish funerals, at removals, things like that. And people come up and they genuinely don't know what to say to you. But you know that, and it's totally fine. So I suppose it's great advice really to say to people, just don't be afraid to say something, because it's definitely appreciated. Yeah.
Okay.
And you mentioned things like memorials, and there's so many amazing things out there. Do these help people in the grieving process? And I suppose I know I can guess what you're going to say, because your approach is definitely facing those emotions as opposed to forgetting them. And I think maybe sometimes people are afraid to be reminded a lot about their lost pet. But do you find that a lot of people really, really are helped by physical objects, I suppose?
Yes, hugely. And when I think back to 2019, when my dogs died, there wasn't an option for me back then where I lived to go down the cremation route. And now that there's individual cremation in Ireland, it's incredible. And I visited a crematorium in Ennis in County Clare, Peaceful Pause, and I was there for an hour and a half. Absolutely, and it opened my eyes to what is now available for pet parents when that time comes. And it's incredible. The respect that's given to your pet, it's emotional to talk about it, because the urns and the necklaces with the ashes you can get, and you can have rings with ashes in it, and it's just there's so much out there, and ways that you can remember your pet. The list goes on. I mean, I celebrate my dogs' lives and the relationship I had with them in several different ways throughout the year. I go for hikes. I go to their favorite beach. I put roses and flowers. I leave them out to the sea, and anything that makes me feel connected to them, because I don't want to forget them. And I know that pet parents, they don't want to forget their pets. And celebrating the joy and the unconditional love that they gave me is something that's really important. And I want to keep that alive. And there are just tons and tons of ways that people can do that. And there's no reason that we should forget. Why? Yeah. The only reason that people would want to forget is because of the painful memories that they have attached to the loss experience, which then in turn means that they have not processed the grief. So,
yeah, Exactly. So they're just burying it for now, and it's going to come out eventually.
Yeah.
So I love the fact also that you mentioned that there's so many things and out there. I think this is one of the main inspirations that we've had for running this talk, is to try and show people the lengths and breadths of the Irish dog community and everything that's out there. Because I think once you start searching, you realize what the whole community can offer. So it's absolutely fantastic. So we're going to have to start wrapping up now. I could honestly talk to you for hours, but I'll never get another speaker to agree to talk to me if I start doing 2-hour sessions. So we spoke about a lot of misconceptions out there, and about grief and about pet death and everything. Is there anything else that you'd like to dispel, or any key advice that you'd like to give people, kind of as a final thought?
Yeah, I just think that it would be great that I'm on a mission to kind of spread awareness that the grief that we feel from pet loss is completely valid. And like when we actually break down grief, it's the conflicting feelings that we feel from a change or end in a familiar pattern of behavior. So that is literally what grief is. And there are so many conflicting feelings when we talk about grief, and when we talk about, being triggered after the death, and like thinking we're coming into the house and we think that we hear them tiptoeing along the ground and all this kind of thing. And those are the conflicting feelings, trying to adjust our lives to this new normal without our pets in our lives, because little do we know that we spend so many hours with our pets, like every single day, and we're responsible for them. And the grief that you're feeling, like, maybe a lot more intense than any grief that you have felt before, even when you're thinking about if you've ever lost a human in your life. And I just want people to know that it's real what you're feeling, and it can be intense, but you can recover from it. And people are going through this for months, and some people are going through it for years. But when we decide to process this and look at it and want to get better, we can recover from grief. Grief and recovery are never put in the same sentence, but I'm putting them in the same sentence. And when I was fully trained from the Grief Recovery Institute in the US, this was something I had never heard before. Grief and recovery. Sure, people think they have to live with grief. You do not have to live with grief. You don't have to live with the pain of grief for the rest of your life. You can recover from it, and you can heal from it. That does not mean that you will not be sad on anniversaries. Of course you will. It's okay to be sad.
Yeah.
But it's just the intensity and the length of that sadness. You can remember the joyful memories quicker then, instead of being stuck in those painful cycles and patterns of memories. So I will leave it there.
Brilliant.
I will keep going.
No, thank you so much. Honestly, you've reframed so many ideas for us all here. It's brilliant. Dispelled so many misconceptions, and I think there's so many things that are probably common sense when you say them, but you kind of have to get to them first. So definitely so valuable. And guys, I really recommend, as always, we keep these talks, informal and conversational. We did make a lot of generalizations, and we also mentioned that everybody's on their own individual journey, so a generalization mightn't be suitable for you or your situation. So do speak to a professional. Guys, also, if you're not already following Light After Loss on Instagram, get on over and follow Louise. I'm loving the lunchtime lives. I normally watch the recordings because I'm working during the day, but I see them on the reels. And if you're not following us, we're at Ruby Reese Official. Louise, thank you so much for being on and being so open and tackling such an emotionally charged subject. I'm sure loads and loads of people appreciate it. Definitely us at Ruby Reese are delighted that you were able to make it on and talk to us about this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Ruby Reese are incredible. I love them, and keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for the chat. It was great.
Thanks a million. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.